guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are back talking about Bad Habit Beauty. They have duped another palette. Have they done as good a job as they have in the past? I don't know, but we're about to get into it.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf. I'm a lone wolf.
Alright guys, so here we are again talking about Bad Habit Beauty duping another palette. So for those of you that don't know, we've done a ton of reviews on this channel on Bad Habit Beauty and the palettes that they've chosen to dupe. For those of you that are new and you've never seen any of those, I definitely recommend that you go and catch up. There's one particular video that we titled "To Dupe or Not to Dupe?" That is the question. And in that video, we really get in depth into the difference between a knockoff and an imitation palette. Keep in mind, guys, that if you ever see a palette out there that's a knockoff where they're genuinely trying to rip off a brand, knockoffs can be very dangerous. For example, if you wanted to go get a knockoff of the Soft Glam palette, a knockoff would look just like this. It would say Soft Glam. It would have Anastasia down here at the bottom. It would have the same sticker on the back. When you opened it, it would look like it was the Anastasia palette. However, it wouldn't be. It would be a knockoff that would be sold for like 15, 10, sometimes $5. But the problem with that is because they even rip off the back, including the ingredients, that you actually don't know what the genuine ingredients of a knockoff is. And a lot of times that can be something incredibly dangerous. So I always say stay away from the knockoffs because they can be very dangerous. Bad Habit Beauty is very different. They are very public. They have their own website, badhabitbeauty.com. They're very similar to like Makeup Revolution, where they imitate a lot of very famous, very highly popular palettes, and they reformulate them in their own formula, and then they put out a palette that's in a similar layout with those exact colors, and it's basically a dupe. And for example, their dupe of the Soft Glam was the Arabesque palette. So you see the difference? It's actually a different palette, and it has the same color layout, just in a different order. A lot of people even have a hard time doing that because they feel like it's, you know, taking away from the initial brand. When you produce like a $129 palette, you have to understand that you have automatically excluded a huge percentage of the population that would love to enjoy that beauty, but you've priced your product so high that it's made it unavailable to those people. Bad Habit Beauty is of that philosophy that beauty should be made available to everyone. So they've just decided to take those really higher end palettes, formulate them really, really well, and redistribute them to the general public at a much more affordable rate. Now, there are a lot of dupe companies out there. There are companies like Face Candy and other places that do dupes for, you know, different brands and high-end palettes. The problem with those is I have tried a ton of them. And for me, Bad Habit has really stumbled upon a formula that rivals those $129 palettes. Bad Habit has one of the best eyeshadow formulas that I've seen in a very long time, and they keep their price under $20 no matter what it is that they're doing, which I think is incredible. This time, they've actually come for a $129 palette. That palette is the Natasha Denona Tropic palette. Now, the Natasha Denona Tropic palette launched, and everybody was really, really excited about it. I liked the palette. I think it's a fine palette. Of course, it's a good palette. It's a Natasha Denona palette, but I also think this is one of my least favorite Natasha Denona palettes out there, simply because the mattes in this and some of the shimmers in this just didn't perform as well as some of her other palettes. So this was $129 that I wish I hadn't spent, and I wish I would have just passed on this particular palette. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this this is a bad palette. This is an Erika-approved palette. Of course it is. It's Natasha Denona. But if you compare this to her other palettes, like the other ones I have in my collection, this does not perform as well as those. And I think if you're going to continue to charge $129, then you need to make sure that you're consistent and that no matter what $129 palette you're picking up, that it's going to be a phenomenal palette. And I just feel like that didn't happen with the Tropic palette. So when I heard that Bad Habit was kind of coming for the Tropic palette, I actually got a little excited because I love the layout of the colors in the Tropic palette. And I think that it was a beautiful design and that the color scheme was brilliant. I just think the formula really underwhelmed me. So I got excited thinking that I could have that color layout and have it in a really good formula that would perform really, really well. So fingers crossed that Bad Habit actually pulled this one off. So let's talk about the two of them side by side. So initially when you first look at the Fantasia palette, I'll let you guys take a look at this one up close. It looks very different than the Tropic palette. It has this very kind of dream state vibe. The front of it is very cloud, like watercolor. It has the Fantasia across the front, and then on the back it's got that purple, and then it has the names of all of the colors back there, and it's got this very smooth, very matte finish to it. It does have a mirror when you open it. It's got a full-size mirror on the inside. The mirror is beautiful. As far as the packaging is concerned, it feels very heavy. It feels very luxe. It doesn't feel like just that cheap cardboard that you feel sometimes when you get like a cheap knockoff. It feels very much like the Nudie Patootie palette, like that smooth kind of matte feeling to it. I love the way it feels. And it's heavy, so it feels like a good solid heavy palette. It doesn't feel like a $16 palette. And I love the fact that it has a mirror. Now, one thing that I found very interesting about these two palettes is that the Natasha Denona palette claims that it has 15 shades in here and that each shade is 1.5 grams of product. Now, I will say this, Natasha Denona got a little flack for this particular palette, and it's because she decided to go with pans that were detachable, that she could fit into like her regular palettes where she sells her singles. And so she went with that size, and they're very wide, but they're very shallow. So it's not a very deep pan. So it's a very wide pan, but it's just not, it's not that deep. It's not that deep. But she did that on purpose so that people could really get in here and kind of play around and, you know, invest in her singles and invest in maybe her empty palettes and stuff like that. So I think she went with the pan size in this for a particular reason. I would have preferred a deeper pan and for it to be smaller, which is actually what the Fantasia palette has done. So this is 15 shadows, and each of these weighs 1.5 grams a piece. So obviously you can see that they're smaller, even though they weigh the same and they have the same amount of product. So these pans are going to be a lot deeper, which reminds me a lot of the Anastasia palettes, and I just prefer that setup. I like to have kind of a smaller, not really small where, you know, you're fluffing product into each other, but a smaller palette where you have a deeper amount of product in here, but they're smaller so that the palette itself is a lot more compact. It's a lot more travel friendly, and you don't have to worry about hauling around this big honking thing with you everywhere that you go. So I love the fact that you get the same amount of product. You get all 15 shades, 1.5 grams a piece, and it's in a nice travel size that feels very luxe. So I love the way the palette looks so far. So I'm going to give you guys a close-up of the inside of the Fantasia palette really quickly, just so that you can see what the actual inside of the palette looks like. Now you have, again, 15 shades here, so you have some subtle neutrals, but all of these shadows are very creamy. That formula from Bad Habit is a very high pigmented creamy formula that blends pretty effortlessly. If this is the same and it performs the same, that's pretty much what you can expect. You do have a range of mattes, metallics, duochromes, those sparkling shadows. It really has every shade in here that the Natasha Denona Tropic palette has in it. Now, one thing that I have noticed in the past is that when Bad Habit dupes another palette, they basically take all of those colors and jumble them up and throw them into their own palette. So they're never in the same order. They're always out of order, and you're always kind of going through the original palette and then trying to search and find that color dupe in the Bad Habit palette. And for me, somebody that films and you want to do side-by-side swatches, that can be a little frustrating, but I know you guys probably don't care. But one thing I noticed that was a little different with this particular palette is that the Bad Habit Beauty palette actually kept the colors somewhat in the same order. So the first row of the Natasha Denona Tropic palette is the first row in the Bad Habit Fantasia palette. It's just out of order. The second row is the second row, just out of order, and the third row in the Tropic palette is the third row in the Fantasia palette. It's just that that third row is a little out of order. So they kind of kept with the same theme, they just put it a little bit out of order. So that's going to make it a little bit easier for me when it comes to doing the side-by-side swatches for you guys. Before we get into the side-by-side swatches, I just want you guys to actually see what these two palettes look like side by side so that you can get like the full appreciation of what they actually look like right next to each other. And when you look at them right next to each other, just from, you know, a really quick overhead view, they look like the same type of palette. They have that same pop of color that kind of grabs your eye, that bottom row that has those bright colors, the neutrals that are more towards the top. I love how the pink still stands out in each in particular palette, but you can clearly see where each individual shadow has been replicated into the Fantasia palette. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you guys the side-by-side swatches once again, just so that you can see what these swatches look like and how the swatches perform. Now, like I always do, what I'll do is I'll actually lay the Natasha Denona Tropic palette on my arm. And then what'll happen is you'll actually watch the swatches from the Fantasia palette. So the Tropic palette will already be on my arm, and then I'll put the Fantasia swatches next to each corresponding color. And we'll start that now. Alright, and we're just laying the first row of the Tropic palette down, and we're going to start with the first color is Stratus from Fantasia. Then we have Nimbus, then we have Above It All, then we have Floating, and then we have Bliss. And that is the first row of the Fantasia palette. Second row of the Fantasia palette, we have Sirius, then we have Delirious, then we have Horizon, then we have Sky's the Limit, which is beautiful, by the way. And then we have Weightless, which is also stunning. And that is the second row of the Fantasia palette. And that's up against the second row of the Tropic palette. Alright, and now we have the Tropic palette down, and the first Fantasia color is Ecstatic. And then the next is going to be Lifted, which I think performs 10 times better than the Natasha Denona color. Then we have Dreamland, and last we have Euphoria. Actually, the next one is last, and that's Invincible. That's the purple one. Yeah, Euphoria is pretty insane. And then again, that's Invincible. And that bottom row in the Tropic palette was always the row I had issues with, but the bottom row in the Fantasia palette is absolutely stunning. I am pretty shocked at the performance. So what I was hoping would happen is exactly what happened. There are shades that are in this Natasha Denona Tropic palette that, in my opinion, are underperforming shades considering that it's Natasha Denona. In the Bad Habit palette, those particular shades perform flawlessly. Kills me because you look at the underperforming shades from the $129 palette, and then you look at how well these shades are performing in the $16 palette. And sometimes it can be a little frustrating, to say the least. So we're going to play a little game. We've played it in the past, and we're going to play Can You Spot the Dupe? We're going to start that now. Alright guys, one of these is from the Tropic palette, and one of these is Ecstatic from the Fantasia palette. Can you guess which one is Ecstatic? It is the one on the bottom row. All right, next we are going to try and guess which one is Euphoria from the Fantasia palette. So one of these is from the Tropic and one is from Fantasia. And the Fantasia color Euphoria is the one on the top. Isn't that crazy? All right, let's do some of these bright colored mattes. One of these is Dreamland from the Fantasia palette. Which one is Dreamland? It is the one on the top. I think those two are pretty spot on. All right, next we're gonna do Weightless. One of these is Weightless from the Fantasia palette. Which one is Weightless? It is the one on the bottom. All right, next we are going to look for Bliss. One of these is Bliss from the Fantasia palette. Which one is Bliss? It is the one on the top. All right, next we have my favorite duochrome, and that is Sky is the Limit from the Fantasia palette. One of these is Sky's the Limit. Which one? It is the one on the top. So were you able to pick out which one was the Fantasia palette and which one was the Natasha Denona palette? Like I said, some of those shades actually perform better than the Natasha Denona palette does, and it's just stunning to me. But anyway, so those are the swatches. That's how they perform on the arm, but at the end of the day, it's really about performance. So I'm going to show you guys some applications here. Now, I will say that I've had an opportunity to dig into this palette and play with it for about a week. I've been able to use it without a primer, and honestly, it performs just like all of the other Bad Habit palettes perform. They blend out beautifully. It lasts for a very long time. The colors do not muddy up. They stay nice and separated. You can create so many beautiful looks with this particular palette, and there really is no fear of underperforming with any of these shades. They perform exactly like they're supposed to. Some of them perform better than the Natasha Denona Tropic palette. I can absolutely say for 100% that if you ever wanted to own the Tropic palette, but you didn't have the money to drop $129, Bad Habit made this palette for you. I would absolutely recommend that you go and grab and pick it up. I've created so many different looks with this particular palette that it really is quite a stunning palette. And I honestly have to say that up until now, my favorite Bad Habit palette has been the Arabesque palette and the Royals palette. These are my two favorite Bad Habit palettes. Even though they've done some beautiful Natasha Denona dupes. They've done like the Solstice palette, which was the dupe for the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. They've done a lot of beautiful palettes in the past. These two just happen to be two of my favorites. Oh, and the Artistry palette, which is the Mario and the Anastasia palette dupe. But I honestly have to say that this is probably one of my top, this is going to be one of my top 3 favorite palettes from Bad Habit. Now, I will say there are a couple of drawbacks with this particular palette. It's not all sunshine and daisies, even though 99.9% of it is sunshine and daisies. It is a cruelty-free palette, but other than that, it really does, it's not that it's powdery. It reminds me a lot of the Anastasia formula in that you can't really take a brush, like in the Soft Glam palette, you can't really take a brush and like get in there because you get a kickback everywhere. You get fly everywhere. It just goes everywhere. They're very soft pressed pigment shadows, and these remind me a lot of those. It's a very soft formula. There's not a lot of fallout on the eye, but there is a lot of fallout in the pan. And like I said, it's the one thing that kind of bugs me about the Anastasia palettes is that it's very similar. You have that powderiness in the actual palette itself, not so much in the eye, but you do do have it in the palette, and that's very similar to the Fantasia palette. It is very powdery on the inside. But honestly, guys, they did it with this one. They did a great job imitating the Tropic palette. They did a fantastic job with the formula. If it's something that you guys are interested in and you live around one of those kind of Riley Rose type boutiques, wander on in and see if they have it for sale, or check it out on the Shop Hush app. Either way, it's definitely worth the $16, and it's absolutely Erika approved. All right, guys, well, thank you so much for coming by and hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it. If you are new here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so that you can become a member of the Approved crew. We would love to have you. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so that you're notified every time I upload a video. Also, don't forget that the contest for the Jeffree Star palette is now closed. So no more entries until we actually announce. We'll be announcing this Friday, which I think when this video goes up will probably be either, it's the 6th. So it'll either be like tomorrow or the day after, depending on when I get this video up. So be ready, be here, or be square. I'll be announcing on my Instagram when that video stream is going to go live. So if you don't follow me, make sure you follow me at ErikaApproved. And if you appreciate the work I do, there'll be a link in the credits so that you can support this channel. All right, guys, I think that is about it. I hope everybody is happy and healthy, and I will see you guys probably in the live stream. Mwah.